Hello everyone, welcome back to my little mini series on a introduction to Excel Esports and tips I would give to someone starting out fresh. Last time I went over what a typical MEWC case looks like in terms of structure. I also went over the four main types of cases that I believe to be a theme in the esport itself. And just to briefly go over them again, they're data, spatial slash movement, modeling, and problem solving slash logic cases. Today I will be going over the types of cases from 2024 that sort of fall into these four main themes, as well as expectations and goals that players of all types of skill levels should have going into the competition. So let's go into the types of cases from last year's Road to Las Vegas. So I have all of the cases starting from Battle 1, the bracket that determines the finalists, the last chance qualification round, and the finals. And I'm not going to dive too deep. I tried to put in the scores as well as like the top 10 score in order to earn it, but fortunately, a lot of these other cases and the finals, it's hard to pull in that data. But just in general, we started off with a spatial slash movement case last year. Doggy Daycare, I believe, written by David Brown. We had some data cases, more spatial. Um, this spreadsheet is a nightmare is a typical case where we see it starts off with data and then pivots to something like a spatial slash movement type of case. The one fun oddball in it is the simple case by Michael Jarman, which is very much a problem solving slash logic type of case. If you're familiar with that case itself, you'll very much agree that it is very much involves a lot of thinking outside the box that you might not find in any of the other cases here. I tried to. I didn't do. I wasn't too much. I still have to go over some of these myself for the bracket, as well as the last chance and the finals cases. But the Iron Man seemed like a modeling one. Axel the Elf was a very good representation of a data case, and then some spatial and modeling ones to close out the 2024 season. So let's just look at some brief summary stats. And again, these are all my opinions. Um, Everyone's welcome to maybe see them a little bit differently, but just in my opinion, these are where the categories fall under. So from last year's season, I think all but one case was data, spatial, or both. And while most were spatial cases, that really demonstrates that these types of cases are very important to master, especially if spatial or map related cases are your weak suit, like myself. Modeling cases, interesting enough, showed up towards the end of the series. Yeah, sure, you could argue that, for doggy daycare, you're modeling a dog moving across a daycare, but I think, what modeling truly represents is something like Iron Man, where you're given a bunch of stats on a player's performance throughout an Iron Man and demonstrating it really requires you to create a model of each second or meter that is involved with that and figuring out who gets what place. And again, for World of Warcraft, of the final one, you're modeling out a game of World of Warcraft. That's what I think modeling is to me. And I also have a little breakdown of the frequency. From here, we've got spatial and movement making up the most. And again, this is counting both type 1 and type 2 if it falls under both. But spatial and movement showed up most frequently, followed by data, followed by problem solving and logic, and then modeling. Isometric chaos I threw in as problem solving slash logic because yes, it's primarily a spatial slash movement case, but what I think it does really well is it forces you to think about those types of cases differently. Um, there's been plenty of spatial slash movement cases involving arrows, but now you're moving across a different kind of grid. And that's where I think that problem solving slash logic comes into play. So that concludes, sort of just summarizing the 2024 season. Let's talk about expectations and goals that players can have across different proficiency levels in the competition. So, what's nice about XL Esports and what I think is really interesting is there's potentials for upsets to occur at any stage, but generally it would be unrealistic to just assume that you're going to outrank the top scorers going into your first case. And that's why it's good to go in with proper expectations so you're not left with possible disappointment or just, getting burnt out too quickly. So let's talk about the beginner level. So, in general, I would say that a beginner might expect to complete the first three levels of a case, and then of a seven level case, I should say, because if you try earlier cases, there might be only five levels, there might not be any levels at all, and it's a very early case. But in general, for a seven level case, you might expect to do levels one through three, and then maybe a bonus or question or two within the 30-minute time period. And that's an important distinction. I'm sure a lot of cases that are beginner friendly would be able to solve with unlimited time, but I think within that 30-minute time frame, that's a good benchmark. And I would say the priority for beginners should be to improve their fundamental knowledge of Excel, the useful functions that are highly reliant for problem solving, when to use them, and then getting comfortable with working under the time pressure given. I think it's best practice for competitors at this level to complete the cases that are beginner friendly, as well as watch the solutions that other people have made to the cases that they have just solved. It's really good to get different perspectives when it comes to growing your Excel knowledge, especially within this esport. And I also think there's benefits to completing one case multiple times. Often, when I am preparing to give walkthroughs, I probably solve a case two or three times. Uh, one to make myself completely aware of how I want to go about solving it and explaining the steps to someone else. And two, sometimes that's just related to technical issues. My might die midway through, and I'm just like, I'm gonna restart. But I think solving a case multiple times, especially maybe even after a small break, can be really beneficial because you really want to reinforce Excel best practices. And that leads into the next point, prioritizing familiarity with the base Excel formulas rather than jumping right into using other people's custom functions or concepts to improve the workflow. I think having that strong foundation allows you to make the most use of sort of the extracurriculars of Excel, so to speak. Um, I think there's value in understanding how a minimum frequency value is calculated, the reverse mode or a mode, and the different methods to use it rather than jumping right to a lambda. And having that intuition can be the foundation for future growth. Finally, I also recommend for beginners to problem solve through movement cases like chess with no stress on one's own before adopting custom functions. That's typically your lambdas of moving around a grid. I think chess with no stress is phenomenally good. It's very much in the name, no stress at all. Um, and lastly, beginners shouldn't worry about finding the most efficient solution with the cleanest workflow. At this stage, really any solution is a good solution here, especially if you're just starting out. Be satisfied with being able to solve a case your way and then work on improvement after that. And I have a list of cases which are ideal for beginners, in my opinion, from the ones that I have completed. The first is What's My Flight Number by Patrick Chatane here. Sorry if I mispronounce anyone's name. I tried to get something among all the different types of data here. And what I like about this one is you can answer questions related to all the flight routes and airport codes. I think it's one of the best cases for competitors to attempt. Even right down to challenging yourself to possibly even have an entire solution to level 7 within a single let statement. There's different ways to approach them and for all different skill levels. Axel the Elf, which was the last chance qualification round in Las Vegas. You answer questions to help save Christmas with a table of naughty and nice children. Tetris Scoring and Baccarat, I'll combine these into two, by Dan Mayo. I would call these modeling ones, and you're using the rules of Tetris or Baccarat, the rules of the game, and you're either calculating a score for Tetris or the number of cards per hand for each of the different wins. So, how many 4 card hands are one for the banker? How many 4 card hands are one for the dealer? How many 4 card hands for the tie? And likewise for 5 and 6 cards. I think both of these are great for modeling. Different structure than what you would expect, but I think good practice. Elections are coming, A License on a Plate, and It's a Sequence, all three by Andrew Griglionovich. Sorry. Good problem solving / logic cases, again, all great for beginners, especially It's a Sequence, very interesting way to think through it. Laundry Time by Peter Scharl, one of my favorites. You're working with a lot of text, giving pieces of clothing and text, answer questions about when outfits are complete. Kruger National Park, which is out of the South African Excel competition, and it's a really great map-based case, and I think the map by itself is extraordinarily beautiful on the grid. It's a piece of art just by itself. Treasure Hunt by Peter Scharl, another good hybrid case of logic and movement. And like I said earlier, Chess with No Stress, again by Andrew, phenomenal case. And I just want to stress that this is not an exhaustive list, but I think in general, cases by Andrew and Klinsmann are very great for beginner-friendly cases. All right, moving on to intermediate. What are the expectations for intermediate competitors? I would consider myself an intermediate one, and I would say that they might expect to reliably compete the first 5 of 7 levels in a typical case, along with 3 bonus questions within the 30 minutes. Intermediate players should begin executing their fundamental knowledge quickly and pushing themselves into more advanced Excel topics such as let and lambdas. While the top placements, top 5, might be out of range for most cases, I would say that players at this skill level definitely have the opportunity to cause more upsets in the rankings between themselves and more established players in the competition. Uh, Progress between cases will likely be inconsistent based on score. Even as someone might only occasionally reach level 5, if they're able to reach that level at a faster pace over time, I think that's an optimistic perspective when it comes to progress. For example, if you reach level 5 quickly, you just have, that many more minutes to complete or at least think over level 6 or work on a bonus problem. So I think, also think of the time perspective there. Competitors can still benefit from practicing even the beginner cases by implementing your more advanced toolkits, your knowledge toolkits for the easier cases and see your growth. You might also want to challenge yourselves to complete what is my flight number with a single let statement for that little practice that I mentioned earlier. However, still try to work out modeling movement with arrows and references with standard functions first. I think having that, again, just to stress that foundation is best rather than working with pre-built lambdas. And lastly, at this level of competition, you can begin to be more mindful about how clean and organized your work is, and you really want to begin the idea of how you want to systematize your workflow, because that's really how the best players are able to compete, as they create a system of how to go about solving these cases. Here are some good cases that I think are representative of something that would be good for intermediate players. So again, what's my flight number? Making a return. I Am Left-Handed, right? By Klinsmann. I think it's a great demonstration of what data cases can look like beyond the beginner level. And also Fantasy Excel and Sommelier, both by Peter Scharl, Sommelier especially, one of my more enjoyable cases from last year. Again, Tetris scoring, I think, I think Tetris scoring is a great case for beginners because you can pretty much solve it in a variety of different ways. And I think for an intermediate player, they might want to look into using only dynamic ranges and really challenge themselves in different areas there. Excel Superheroes by Andrew, simulating an esports battle. Passing Notes by William Garrettson, and American Bingo, also by Andrew. I think these fall under the problem-solving/logic category. And we're going to conclude out with Bear Island and Doggy Daycare, both with spatial movement. So that concludes the intermediate. Now let's look at uh, the advanced category of players. So in order to be the best, you have to beat the best, and competitors at this level are frequently battling out for the top spots, often based on time after already achieving their perfect scores. Advanced players will expect to solve a typical case within the 30 minutes and try to submit their perfect score the fastest. They will also use all the tools available to them, including pre-built lambdas, data table sheets, generative AI resources, OA robots, which other people have done much more extensive reviews of it than I currently have an understanding of. And making the jump from intermediate to advanced is very difficult. Your returns will be diminished, but practice will allow for faster completion of the easier portion of cases, allowing for more time to focus on the harder parts. Players hoping to reach this level of mastery should constantly practice as many cases as they can and watch solutions to the hardest ones. Additionally, they can begin coding their own custom lambdas or referencing others that have been made available. And I think most importantly at this stage, keeping calm and focused under the time pressure is just as important as the fundamental Excel knowledge. And I think only at this level, I think working through optimization through the Alt shortcuts Excel or even the hotbar ribbon will be useful. This is where you're really looking for any edge that you can to speed up your workflow, systematize everything involved, and really make a shot for getting the top score with the top time. So cases that I think are ideal for the advanced players, these are probably, I would just should rephrase this as the hardest cases, probably. Cases that really take the types of cases to the extreme, and that'd be a dicey battle in a simple case, both by Michael Jarman. I think there's a lot of perspectives out here that probably believe that these are the two hardest cases so far. A dicey battle basically could be seen as modeling, but you're problem solving a simulated version of Dicey Dungeons, which is a fun indie game, and a simple case that is quite difficult using non-coding solutions. So not using Python, not using VBA, and just using the Excel grid, I think, is where it becomes most challenging. EVE Online by Niels, it's a data case. Definitely a lot of stuff going all around, a lot of different moving parts, makes it very difficult. World of Warcraft, the finals case from last year by David Fortin and Andrew, modeling the progression of characters through their World of Warcraft playthrough. Again, hardest cases for the finals. Clash on Titan, Michael Jarman, he was, notice, the author of the two hardest cases, and he was the highest score of this case, and even he said it was a hard case. So basically, you're modeling, if you know the term, it's an auto battler. Basically, you set up the criteria of the rules, and you have two different teams fight each other. That's what an auto battler is. It's completely, it's like, you could think of Baccarat as an auto battler in a way, funnily enough, but that's what it is there. Lana Goes Ice Skating by Harry for another spatial movement one, very difficult one. And finally, Isometric Chaos by Klinsman. Very creative twist on the typical arrows along the map, I must say. So that concludes both the types of cases from last year as well as expectations for goals. I'm going to conclude this likely three-part series with the solution fundamentals as well as listing out the other MEWC YouTubers to look at. So thanks for watching so far, and I'll see you in the last video.